Everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on revisions to SSA's mental disorder listings and what this means for SOAR providers. Today's webinar is presented by the SAMHSA SOAR Technical Assistance Center at Policy Research Associates under contract to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Kristen Lupfer, Project Director of the SOAR TA Center, and I will be moderating today's event. I'd like to introduce Rob Grace, Public Health Advisor with SAMHSA's Center for Mental Health Services, Homeless Programs Branch, and the Contract Officer for SOAR, who will give our welcome today. Rob.
Sixth, the administration published new rules updating how they evaluate mental health conditions to assure you that while this means some changes and how we organize and present evidence and modifications to SOAR training, the SOAR TA Center will be working in partnership with you every step of the way to ensure you are fully informed and prepared for this transition. Today's webinar, SSA will present background and key policy details, and SOAR TA Center will describe what this means for SOAR providers in terms of documenting disability and training, and what materials and resources have been updated.
So we'd like to remind you that this training is supported by SAMHSA and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The contents of this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA or DHHS, and the training should not be considered substitutes for individualized care and treatment decisions. Housekeeping items before we begin. Lines will be muted throughout the webinar, and this is being recorded and will be available for download on the SOAR website in about a week. Right now, you may download the PowerPoint slides to view following the webinar. Top of your screen, you can go to File, Save Document to download materials. You're going to receive a brief evaluation at the conclusion of the webinar that we ask you to complete. Finally, we'll save all questions until the end of the presentation. We'll review the instructions for asking questions via chat or phone at that point. It's our intention that at the end of this webinar, you'll understand why SSA updated the mental disorder listings, understand what updates have been made and how this impacts the documentation of disability, and to understand what tools and resources the SOAR TA Center has updated and made available to SOAR leads and practitioners. Those objectives, we will begin this afternoon with Joanna Furman, Supervisor Branch 1, Medical Policy and Childhood Disability Policy in the Office of Medical Policy at the Social Security Administration. We'll then hear about updates for the SOAR community from Jen Elder, National Policy and Partnerships Coordinator here at the SOAR TA Center. And we'll end with plenty of time for questions and answers. Now, turn it over to Joanna Furman with the Social Security Administration.
Start by discussing why we updated the mental disorders listings. The current listings for evaluating mental disorders are 30 years old. The medical criteria in the revised listings reflects the diagnostic criteria for mental disorders in the current version of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM-5, which is the standard classification of mental disorders used by mental health professionals in the United States. The current medical criteria are based on the diagnostic criteria in the DSM-3, the addition of the DSM available at that time. To serve individuals in need, it is essential that our criteria for evaluating mental disorders are consistent with current medical standards and care practices. Looking at the revised rules, we considered the medical community's understanding of mental disorders, feedback from professional organizations, advocacy groups, and the public, and program experience. For a brief overview of rulemaking history, revised rules are the culmination of a continuous, connected process that started with our advance notice of proposed rulemaking published in 2003. In the time before and after the publications of the advance notice of proposed rulemaking and the notice of proposed rulemaking in 2010, we engaged with advocacy groups, medical professionals, and the public on our proposed policies. We published the final rule on September 26th of this year. We made its effective date from our usual 60 days after publication. Time to update our systems, provide training and guidance to all of our adjudicators, and review our internal forms and operating instructions before we implement the revised rules. The revised rules will be effective on January 17th, 2017. We'll apply these rules to new applications filed on or after the effective date and to claims that are pending on or after the effective date. As you already know, the technical difficulties here. As you may already know, we use a 5-step sequential evaluation process to determine whether an adult is disabled. At step 1, we consider individual's work activity. At step 2, we consider the severity of the individual's impairment or combination of impairments. At step 3, we also consider the severity of the individual's impairment when we determine whether the impairment meets or medically equals a listing. We do not deny claims at step 3. If we do not allow the claim at step 3 using the listings, we can go on to steps 4 and 5 of the sequential evaluation process. At these steps, we consider the individual's age, education, and work experience. He or she may qualify for benefits at step 5. All of the mental disorders listings, except listing 1205, have a similar structure. A includes medical criteria. Paragraph B includes functional criteria. And paragraph C, which is in listings 12.02, 12.03, 12.04, 12.06, and 12.15, is alternative functional criteria. In order to meet a listing, a person's mental disorder must satisfy the paragraph A and B criteria, or for those listings with paragraph C criteria, the mental disorder must satisfy the paragraph A and C criteria. The only exception to this is listing 12.05, which I will discuss a little later. The medical criteria in paragraph A are based on the updated diagnostic criteria for mental disorders in the DSM-5. The details of the listings are also updated to reflect the terminology in the DSM-5. Note that the numbered listings reflect many of the diagnostic categories from the DSM-5, with the exception of listing 12.05, intellectual disorder, which is not a diagnostic category from the DSM-5. Each listing contains the paragraph B functional criteria. We use these criteria to evaluate the severity of an individual's mental disorder. We'll use the current paragraph B criteria, which are activities of daily living, or ADLs, still functioning, concentration, persistence, or pace, and episodes of decompensation, January 16th, 2017. We will begin using the revised paragraph B criteria on January 17th, 2017. The revised criteria are: understand, remember, or apply information, act with others, create, persist, or maintain pace, and adopt or manage oneself. We also refer to these criteria as the areas of mental functioning an individual uses in a work setting. While ADLs will no longer be one of our listing criteria, ADLs will continue to play an important role in our program as a type of information. We continue to use information about how an individual performs his or her ADLs and to infer how he or she would be able to use his areas of mental functioning in a work setting. Keep in mind that the demands of a work setting are different from the person's home setting. The revised rules also provide definitions for the 5 points of the rating scale that adjudicators use to rate the degree of limitation an individual has using his or her paragraph B areas of mental functioning. The definitions are no limitation or none. The individual is able to function in this area independently, appropriately, effectively, and on a sustained basis. Mild limitation. Individuals functioning in this area independently, appropriately, effectively, and on a sustained basis is slightly limited. Limitation. Individuals functioning in this area independently, appropriately, effectively, and on a sustained basis is fair. Limitation. The individuals functioning in this area independently, appropriately, effectively, and on a sustained basis is seriously limited. And finally, extreme limitation. The individual is not able to function in this area independently, appropriately, effectively, and on a sustained basis. So the definition of extreme limitation states that individual would not be able to function in the given area. RLC continues to be that extreme limitation does not necessarily mean a total lack or loss of ability to function. Paragraph C criteria, which is alternative functional criteria, evaluate serious and persistent mental disorders. The introductory statement in paragraph C requires medically documented history of the existence of the disorder over a period of at least 2 years. Subparagraph C1 requires that the individual receives ongoing medical treatment, mental health therapy, psychosocial support, or a structured setting that diminishes the symptoms or signs of his or her mental disorder. Subparagraph C2 requires that, despite the diminished symptoms and signs of the mental disorder, the individual has achieved only marginal adjustment. The intent of the paragraph C criteria is to identify individuals who now appear stable only because they rely on significant supports in order to function day to day. When an individual who previously had impaired functioning due to his or her mental disorder appears to now have relatively stable baseline functioning, we identify that his or her mental disorder satisfies the paragraph B criteria. However, if we would expect such individuals' functioning to decline if his or her supports functioning were no longer available, or if he were put into a more challenging or demanding situation, such as in a competitive workplace, we can find that his or her mental disorder satisfies the paragraph B criteria. The rules reorganize and simplify listings 12.05 and 112.05, intellectual disorder. The new listing criteria closely match the diagnostic criteria for intellectual disability in the DSM-5 and the definition of intellectual disability from the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, or AIDD. The listings contain only a paragraph A and a paragraph B. We 12.05A and 112.05A, individual has intellectual disability but is unable to take a standardized intelligence test. 12.05B and 112.05B, when an individual has intellectual disability and is able to take a standardized intelligence test. An introductory text section 12.00H includes comprehensive guidelines for applying listing 12.05. The revised rules include new listings, listings 12.11 and 112.1 for neurodevelopmental disorders, listings 12.13 and 112.13 for eating disorders, list 12.15 and 112.15 trauma and stressor-related disorders, and list 112.14 for developmental disorders in infants and toddlers. The psychiatric review technique, or PRT, is the term we use to describe our process of evaluating mental impairments in adults at steps 2 and 3 of the sequential evaluation process. The PRT involves using the 5-point rating scale to rate the degree of limitation an individual has using the 4 areas of mental functioning, or the paragraph B criteria. As step 2, we use the 4 areas of mental functioning and the rating scale to help us assess if the adult's mental impairment is severe. At 3, we use 4 areas of mental functioning and the rating scale to help us assess if an adult's mental impairment meets or medically equals a listing. We only use the PRT for adult claims involving mental impairments. The P, both the paper and electronic formats of the technique, will be revised to be consistent with the revised listings. The P policies have not changed. Now I'll quickly describe the content and some sections of the introductory text for the listings. Section 12.00A names the listings, describes the paragraph A, B, and C criteria, and explains how the listings are met. Section 12.00B contains 11 numbered sections, 1 section for each listing, provides information about the disorders we evaluate under each listing, and gives examples of diagnoses. Section 12.00C examples of sources of evidence, explains the value of longitudinal evidence, discusses how to evaluate claims that do not have longitudinal evidence, and explains how to evaluate evidence about people function in unfamiliar settings or supported situations. Section D provides guidance on how to evaluate the effects of an individual's mental disorder when he or she is receiving a lot of support or treatment. Sections E and F have more guidance about the paragraph B criteria and how to evaluate an individual's limitations. Section E includes more guidance about paragraph C criteria that appear in listings 1202, 1203, 1204, 1206, and 1215. Now to wrap up my presentation, I'll give you a quick summary of the revised rules. The rules are consistent with the current version of the DSM, which is the DSM-5. They update the criteria we use to evaluate the effects of mental disorders on the ability to function in daily life and in work settings. In general, the revised rules reflect current diagnostic standards, terminology, and clinical attitudes towards mental health disorders. Revised rules also recognize that individuals who experience chronic homelessness may have difficulty obtaining supporting medical evidence, and they'll identify non-medical sources of evidence. They'll articulate how the support an individual receives, for example, help from family, may falsely present the individual as having more abilities and independence in reality. What we see in the disability program is downstream of what happens in clinical practice. The outside world and medical treatments have evolved and changed, and revised rules will be up to date with those trends. Now, but not least, how can you help? You help the applicant complete the SSA 3380-BK form, which is the Function Report Adult Third Party. The individual receives the form from the Disability Determining Services, or DDS. You help the applicant obtain copies of medical records, especially mental health counseling records. And you can help the applicant stay in contact with staff at the state DDS office and respond to requests, information, records, etc. from that office. I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this webinar.
All right, thanks, Joanna. All right, I'm going to turn it over now to Jen Elder, who's going to talk about up to SOAR resources.
Great, Kristen, and thank you, Joanna, for that fantastic information from the Social Security Administration. Oh, just finding my slide. So now we want to talk about some updates for the SOAR community. So I'm so excited to see so many of you on this webinar and hopefully many others accessing the recording after the fact. So I want to point towards all of the new resources that we've updated in response to the changes in the mental disorder listings. So we're in depth to all of the changes in the rules and how to present evidence, but I'm going to point you in the right direction for where to find that on our website immediately after the webinar. It's all live right now. So time for updates. So today we released all new updated training materials and tools. We're really excited about you seeing them and using them in your communities. We're been a lot of great hard work from your SOAR TA Center liaisons putting this together. So because we're releasing this today, the SOARers, trainees and trainers will have 2 full months before the rule goes into effect to become comfortable with the changes, have a time to practice, and have time to ask us any and all questions that you have. So we're going to be fully prepared for implementation when the rules go into effect on January 17th. So rules are updated. This gives just an overview of the updates on the SOAR online course, different tools that I know you use every day in your communities, and training slides that are available. I'm going to go through all of these separately, so I won't linger here with the updates. So first, SOAR online course. We've provided new comprehensive information on the updated mental disorder listings. Now, with these changes, we took a great opportunity to go more in depth than we ever have before. So I really encourage everybody to take a look at these new articles. We included 4 brand new articles just dedicated to the listing. So about, I guess it'd be about 4 listings on each one, 3 or 4. And here's some screenshots from those new articles. So each listing, it goes in depth with the disorder. So you'll see neurocognitive disorders, an overview of what that means, symptoms that are related to that disorder, and some of the examples of disorders evaluated under that listing, such as major neurocognitive disorder, Alzheimer's, progressive brain tumor. A lot of things that we may not be familiar with, particularly practitioners that don't have a mental health background, and that's okay. So now we're here to help provide you with that information. We also created new sections in each article for diving deeper, understanding things like cognitive functioning, which is the example on this slide, or maybe understanding different types of personality disorders, or what do delusions mean or hallucinations mean in the listing for schizophrenia. So we dove really in depth to provide a lot of great examples for this community. On the slide, you'll see some of the new articles to review. We have also revised some of our articles, both in Class 4, where you'll see the mental disorder listings, and just general overview about the listings and mental illness. Now, no need to jot this down very quickly. We'll have the web at the near the end of the presentation that has a link to all of the new updates, all in one place. So we tried to keep it easy for you. But just wanted to highlight some of the new changes. The new articles on functional information. And so the articles are, of course, on new areas of functioning, understand, remember, or apply information, adapt, manage oneself. But we also did a pretty in-depth revision of the other functional areas that were there. Because then, just like the listings, we wanted to go, further than we ever have before, because we got this great chance to, recreate our resources to meet your needs. So some screenshots here. For each functional area, we gave some examples of what types of things might be symptoms of or indicators of impairments in this area. So these screenshots are from understand, remember, or apply information, one of our new areas, and see, refers to the abilities to learn, recall, use information to perform work activities. And see some examples, remember short or long-term details, logic thinking, identifying and solving problems. And then it gives tips on gather information. So for those who have been familiar with the SOAR training in the past, we've always had some examples of how to ask questions when we're interviewing applicants. But we wanted to put in a reminder that your observations are so important when preparing these applications. So some of these tips might be, do you frequently have to remind the applicant of upcoming appointments? Or does he miss scheduled SOAR appointments? That might be something we think we should be documenting, but it can absolutely be helpful for the application. So types of tips, little bits of information are scattered all throughout our new articles. And like I said, for our existing articles, we went ahead and added more tips to those as well. Here's articles to review on functional information, and a revised article, of course, with some additions. We've taken a new look at our identifying SOAR applicants to put in the new information there. Things we did that we think will be very helpful in the articles for functional information. We have a section for area functioning of putting to practice. How we gather, translate the information that we gather into a functional description. That's quite a skill and a technique that we know as SOAR practitioners take a lot of practice for all of us. And so we gave some examples of observations or information from the record for some scenarios. Maybe combined it with applicant statements. Here's an example of how you would take observations, information from records, combine it with statements, and write an effective functional description. So it shows, again, the importance of your observations and how to put that together. Included different examples of this for each area of functioning. So again, gives you a lot of great examples to take from. If you're a SOAR lead or a trainer, these are great to pull from when you're talking with trainees and you're go through refresher trainings and providing examples for them. So covered, active daily living is now no longer going to be a separate area of functioning. It's going to be a source of information about all 4 of the paragraph B areas. So it's going to continue to be incredibly important that you gather information about activities of daily living. And the principle behind this is that in any activity, an ADL task, it may involve simultaneous use of multiple areas. So, this was an example taken from the new language from Social Security, but we thought it was really great, and I think it can be very helpful to walk through this with others who are using SOAR in your community to try to see how we can integrate information about ADLs throughout the areas of functioning. So, for example, a difficulty in an ADL task may result from 1, difficulty understanding what to do, B, to engage in the task around others, trouble concentrating at the task at hand, or becoming so frustrated in the task that the person loses self-control in the situation. So these represents the new areas of functional information: understand, remember, or apply information, interact with others, concentrate, persist, maintain pace, and then adapt or manage oneself. So we see how that can apply in varying ways depending on the situation. In course, with the practice studies, we make minor updates to the progress notes for fictional applicants, Mike and Colette, to include a little bit more functional information for the areas of functioning. But not very, the core information about these case studies remains the same. And so that I really noticed when going through the progress notes for these is that the info that we needed to address the new functional areas was already in there. So, that was very confidence inspiring that we've been collecting, information comprehensive for SOAR the whole time, and we already have what we need to apply it to the new areas. So the big change is really just going to be in how we're organizing the information and presenting it. So a great thing that makes me more confident in the fact that what we're doing works, and it's not going to be, maybe a big than maybe some of us thought. It's just going to be, how do we organize it in the new areas? I have a lot of examples. One didn't put it in here, but we've got another article on the online course. It'll links with sample functional descriptions, which contains even more example functional descriptions for the new areas. So you'll be able to take a look and see how, you do collect that information and get it fits really well under this new area of functional information, maybe adapt or manage oneself. So logistically, with the SOAR online course, trainees have the option addressing the current 4 areas of functioning or the new areas of functioning in their medical summary reports for the course until January 17th. So for trainees who want to go ahead and practice writing to the new areas, they're more than welcome to do so. All the materials are already available for them to do that. But, you know, many trainees who are already in the process and maybe they're close to being done with that SOAR online case, they can still continue to write to the 4 areas of functioning. There's no need to redo all the materials just because we've added these at this time. However, all trainees registering for or finishing the course after January 17th will only address the new function areas. We want to make sure that people, you know, if they're not as far down the line with their medical summary report, maybe they're just starting the course, they go ahead and, you know, stretch themselves and practice with the new 4 areas of functioning. Because we want everybody to feel confident, we want them to feel fully prepared for the implementation of the new rules on January 17th. So our tools, the key tools are now available both in their current form and in what we're calling the January 17th versions on our website. So that's our interview guide and template, identifying applicants, quality review checklists, on the record review letter, sample MSRs. And so, you know, we make sure, of course, that we keep the current versions up there while the current rules are still in effect. A way to practice new information and become familiar with it, we do have the new versions as well, and they're clearly marked in the course what version you'll be in, and library on our website as well. The contents, though, will be removed from the website on January 17th. We don't want any further confusion after that, so we'll go ahead and take that information down at that time. That would be very important for you as SOAR practitioners and community leaders is to take time now to use these sample tools to update your local SOAR resources. So you have your own version of identifying applicants that's unique to your area, maybe to your community or your state process. You know, use whatever information we have to make it easier to review your local tools. We don't want you to feel like you have to recreate the wheel for anything. And if there's something that we help with amending those documents that you may have locally, I want you to reach out to your SOAR TA Center liaison. We're more than happy to provide that help for you. With new training materials that we're very excited about. SOAR fundamental slides. Our SOAR leaders will be very familiar with these. These are the refresher training slides. We've got 2 new updated slides in there for help with your refresher trainings for individuals who have completed the SOAR online course. But we also, what I wanted to highlight today is a brand new training slide deck that we have specific mental disorder listings and functional information changes. We use a great training for current SOAR providers about the changes. So you work with a community and you got, you know, 10 great SOAR providers who have been doing wonderful work, but not sure where to go for in the new mental disorder listings or the functional changes. This could be a quick, you know, maybe 2-hour retraining refresher for them just on the pertinent information about these changes. They don't have a whole, you know, full day refresher training because they're doing great work with SOAR. They need to know about the listings. I've included some of the screenshots from that new training. We go in depth on each of the new listings to provide information similar to what we have in the SOAR online course and links to where trainees can find additional information. So that give you the website is up and running and available for you now. So what do you do to prepare? Now there's a site that's the top one that has the full list of updates article called SOAR Resources Updates. You can search in the SOAR online course. If you're not connected to the webinar right now and looking at the website address, you can search that on our webpage. That has the full list of updates and links for the new information. So it's a great page to bookmark and to share with your community partners so to make sure that everybody's aware of these changes and has the resources and tools to be fully supported. So specifically for state and local leads, ask that you update your training materials and any packets of information that may be affected. We want to make sure that we start training all on the same page, all with this current information. And we ask that you share this information on your listservs. Reach out to everyone who may have missed this webinar. Again, this is being recorded. It's going to be put up on our website for anybody to access. And we just want to make sure that we're reaching everybody who might be using SOAR so that they are fully aware of these updates. For practitioners, update your folders with the new SOAR tools, particularly the MSR interview guide and template. Because areas of functioning have changed, as I mentioned, we'll organize the information just a bit differently. It'll have all those great questions underneath each functional area of what to ask and how to gather that information. You want to make sure that those are updated in your files. And colleagues about the new functional areas and what to observe and report. So as you're working with community partners can be so helpful in, gathering additional evidence. So maybe you're working with a support worker at the shelter, talking with them about what to observe about how the applicant, manages their daily needs or adapts to change. Or maybe, talking about how if they have trouble, they seem to appear to have trouble understanding information or remembering appointments. Those are all great things to document in support of these applications. So talking with anybody who may work with the applicant about these new areas is a great way to make sure we're gathering appropriate documentation for these applications. So key points to remember that I will leave you with is, again, I know I've said it a few times, bears repeating, the main changes will be how we organize and present information. You'll see when you start taking a deep look into all of our new resources that the information SOAR providers currently gather is still relevant and very important. So, keep doing what you're doing. Just, incorporate some of these new changes into your work and, incorporate these new tools into, how you go about interviewing and working with applicants. We've got 2 months to become familiar with the new rules before they go into effect. So we've got plenty of time to answer questions, to talk with you. You're always available at SOAR TA Center liaisons to support every step of the way. We want to be here and support as it goes forward. As many of you know, we review medical summary reports at any time as long as the key personally identifying information is removed before you send to us. So maybe you want a new set of eyes on your MSR the first time you write one to new functional areas. That's, we're excited about that. Please send that our way, and we're happy to provide some feedback on that. So thanks, God. I think we have some time for questions.
Yes, so much, Jen. So we're going to open the floor for questions or comments. There are 2 ways you can ask our panelists a question. So you can question into the Q&A panel that's located underneath the participant tab, and you'll notice that's been opened back up. Or to ask a question by phone, you can raise your hand by clicking the hand icon in the participant pod, and we can unmute you so you can ask a question there. All right. I'll go ahead and type in those questions. I know you guys will have them. There's a question This will be for you, Joanna, and it is when will SSA update the online listing? So I assume this is referring to, you know, the link on SSA's website.
Yes, the listings online will be updated probably the night before the effective date. So they will be available online on January 17th.
Great, thank you. All right, the next question is, can you go over the IQ changes in more depth regarding intellectual disabilities? So I think this is in reference to listing 12.05 and how there's a little bit of different distinction about the IQ scores and levels for that listing.
Hi, this is Angela LaPierre from Social Security Administration. Under our current intellectual disability listing 1205, the lettered paragraphs are to a certain degree organized by IQ score. So 1205B discusses our criteria if someone has a IQ score of 59 or lower, and then paragraphs C and D about our criteria for people who have an IQ score of 60 through 70. And under the final rules, under the new listing that will be available that will apply January 17th, we no longer have these hierarchy of IQ scores. We have two lettered paragraphs. The first paragraph, 1205A, is similar to our current rule for 1205, and that's the listing criteria for people whose cognitive limitations prevent them from being able to take a standardized IQ test. Anyone who is able to take an IQ test, we only have one IQ score requirement, or actually we have two. It's broken into two paragraphs. For people who are able to take an IQ test, the evidence that we use to establish that the person has significant deficits in general intellectual functioning is demonstrated by if the person has a full-scale IQ score of 70 or below, or a full-scale IQ score of 71 through 75, and then a verbal or performance IQ score of 70 or below.
Thank you, Angela. That was very helpful. All right. Question is, how will the new functional areas relate to writing the MSRs for physical disabilities?
I'm not sure. Did you want Social Security answer the question of the MSR?
I mean, fine. I mean, if you want to answer to kind of replying to the listing criteria, and then we can clarify for the MSR.
Okay. Could you just say the question one more time? I just want to make sure I answer it the correct question.
Yeah, so the question was about how will these new revised functional areas for the mental disorder listings, will they impact writing the MSRs for physical disabilities?
They should not, no.
Right, and so that's, I would just reiterate that so that when you're, writing to someone's mental impairment in the MSR and focusing on functioning, that's what these four functional areas relate to. But Social Security looking at different medical criteria for other physical impairments, and we'll be looking to the listing criteria for those physical impairments. Answer it for you. Okay. So there's a question here. With the changes, would it be a good idea to do the course again, so the SOAR online course, as a refresher with the new changes? Jen, take that one.
I think that's a great question and a great idea. I think it's actually probably a good idea every so often to look through the course materials again as a refresher. Not terribly frequently, but every so often if Social Security maybe updates a form or, we provide more information on a different section, we are continuously adding information. So an example outside of this is a few months ago we added a couple new articles on appeals. And so, constantly kind of strengthening the course for that. So I think in general it's a great idea to, touch, with it again and review it. In absolutely more, you'd like to take it again and maybe work with a different practice case than you had before. So say if you had Mike, if you want to work on Colette, we can certainly reset the course for you. Just email us and let us know that you'd like to do that to to do the practice case again.
And just add to that, that if you don't do the entire course again, let's say you've just recently finished it, I would recommend, following our link to the kind of all of the updates and resources, that summary page that'll have links to every new article, and definitely read through all of the new articles if you don't choose to go through the course in its entirety again. All right, so this is another question about kind of when to start using revised forms and documents of the information. So the question is, I noticed that the MSR says on or after January 17th, so should we start using it now for the practice?
So you should start taking at it and gathering that information. Now, again, Social Security is not going to start using these rules until January 17th. So Joanna might be able to speak again to pending cases that are maybe filed before January 17th and how those are looked at and the Category B criteria for that. But those resources on there just for you to become familiar with it for those cases filed on or after that date.
So that's a perfect way to another question that we have where someone's looking for clarification about when they'll actually be put into effect. So if the listings will apply only to applications dated 1717 or any that are being adjudicated after that time that were filed before, so those pending cases. So if you could, Joanna, clarify the pending application question.
Sure, happy to. In publication in September, in the December 26th in the Federal Register, there is a paragraph about this and then a footnote that explains a little more. But I will just say simply that a new application filed on or after January 17th, 2017, any pending claim that's on or after January 17th, 2017, we will use these revised rules to our determination.
Great. It helps clear things up for folks. So they are going to be using these revised rules for those cases. So this is a related question. So someone says, with brand new clients, since we typically take 2 months before we submit the full claim, which would take us up to, January 16, 2017 or later, should we start formatting our MSRs to the new rules due to the claims being submitted after the new rules go into effect? Ultimately, I think the answer to this question is yes, go ahead and do that because they're going to be looking at that case rules. So it will be for you as well. It's kind of a follow-up clarification for that. So we know the cases that are going to be pending at DDS, so they'll be evaluated under new rules starting on 17th. What about those that have been waiting for a hearing? Will the same rule go into effect on the same date at the ALJ level?
Yes.
Okay. Next question. Rapid fire, you guys. This next question says, it's about acceptable medical sources. It says, under the new rules, can an MSR be signed by a clinical social worker or other non-MD? And how much weight will be given to medical evidence and medical opinions offered by folks who don't have an MD or PhD? And this is my own personal, sub to this question is that there may be confusion because people have seen the proposed rules about changes in acceptable medical sources. So just to clarify what the if you Joanne, Angela, clarify acceptable medical sources that are currently in practice.
This is Robin Doyle. I'm also with Social Security, so I wasn't able to join you earlier. Basic answer is that immediate future, we will continue to use the current rules about acceptable medical source and our current rules for evaluating medical opinions and anything related to that. As you mentioned, we did publish a notice of proposed rulemaking, putting changes in both of those areas of policy. And the comment period has ended for those comments on that NPRM. We are in the process now of developing the final rule, and we expect that final rule to be published sometime in the spring, and we'll announce the effective date at the time we publish it. What's still pending, we're not able to give any specific direction, in terms of what changes might be going into effect when we do the final rule. We'll have to wait for coming attractions.
Yes, thank you, Robin. We are anxiously awaiting that. So I'll just add to that, from the SOAR perspective in the MSR, definitely have that clinical social worker or, any practitioner, to sign that MSR and just do your best to get the MD or PhD to co-sign that as well to make sure that it's to the weight of medical evidence. All right. So this one's good for you, Jen. Will there be any updates to the applicant assessment and functional information worksheet?
Great. So those worksheets were from our Stepping Stones materials, and so what we did with those is we transformed those into our medical summary report interview guide. So you take a look at that. It's pretty much the same format, and just has a lot more questions related to that. So we're no longer updating any of the Stepping Stones worksheets that we previously provided. We've moved towards the MSR interview guide and template.
Thanks. All right. Another question here is, as a result of these changes, our state has had several questions concerning definitions for SMI, or serious mental illness. Will the federal definition of SMI be updated, reflecting the new criteria?
This is from the Social Security Administration. The only definition that we provide in this final rule for our purposes for disability determinations for mental illness is one that's persisted for 2 years.
Thank you, Angela. So it's possible, Ms. Baxter, this was your question, referring to another definition that's outside of Social Security's purv, and so these Social Security changes aren't changing any other definitions. Okay. Looking to see what else. A question, Joanna, for you about something you said in your presentation, looking for a clarification. She's wondering if she heard correctly that there will no longer be approvals at step 3.
No, that is not correct. I do apologize for any thing that I may have miscommunicated. The point I was trying to make is just that in our 5-step sequential evaluation process, these updated revised mental disorders listings are used at step 3, and at step 3, we only allow claims. So if we do not allow the claim at step 3, we continue in our sequential evaluation process, and we may also allow then at step 5. So the point I intended to make was that we do not deny based on these listings. We do not deny claims at the listing step.
Great, thank you for clarification. All right, question here about what if your agency does not yet use the DSM-5? Jen, we could maybe tackle that one first.
This is Jen, and you can add, Kristen, if I missed something. So with this, it's not as important that your agency uses the DSM-5 criteria for diagnosing or assessing. It's just the point with the updates in the mental disorder listings is that they were taking information from the DSM-5 and based on those updates to, in the community, and they based a lot of updates on that. Now, again, as previously, the diagnoses don't match exactly from the DSM to the mental disorder listings. There's always been a difference there, and so just make sure you're reviewing those new mental disorder listings. We have them in our online course now, and then once they're posted on Social Security's website, taking a look at that and what they're looking for, mostly how the symptoms are matched up with listing, not kind of specific diagnosis that a provider may have made. They're looking to see, do they meet the other medical criteria such as symptoms and in medical records. So it's okay that your agency doesn't use the 5 yet.
And I'm that up to SSA too, if you guys had any comments about, people who have questions about using the DSM or IC or other diagnostic manuals and, the input of that or not to SSA.
We really agree with the answer that was given previously because it's correct. And also there are, in addition to your providers, we are still receiving medical evidence that's based on the diagnostic instructions from prior editions of the DSM, like the DSM-4, the text revision to the DSM-4, and the DSM-5. And although listings reflect the terminology and the criteria from the DSM-5, we're accustomed to receiving medical evidence that's not necessarily completely conforming with the DSM-5, and our adjudicators are prepared to be able to evaluate that evidence against our listing criteria, so that shouldn't be a concern.
Perfect. Excellent. All right, we're going to switch things up. We have a hand raised, so we're going to open up a line for Beth Moot. And so, Yara, if you could open up her line. Hey, your question.
I had a question earlier on the screen because it wasn't moving properly. I don't really have one right now.
Okay, great. Well, we got that solved for you. I guess you saw that. So, all right, good deal.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. Okay, we have one hand raised. It's Jose. Can we open up his line? Is he connected to audio?
He seems to be connected to audio.
Okay. We'll go to another text question. We have one that says, this is related to listing 12.05. So for cases that are similar to adjudicate under the current rules, that is 1205 cases with recent full scale of 59 or lower, are DDSs being encouraged to adjudicate those in a faster time frame.
LaPierre from SSA, and at this time, we have not given them any instruction to that effect.
I have a question here. There be a revised SSA function report?
The direct result of these revised regulations have not, in conjunction with this revised rule, updated function reports. That being said, like if we in the future, because those function report forms are completed by the public, they require apply the Office of Management and Budget. There's a whole process for notifying the public about any changes we intend to make to our information collection tools. There would be a notice to the public about those changes. So no, not at this time. We're not changing our function report forms. The only form that we have changed, which I did talk about, even though it's not used by the public, it's our psychiatric review technique form. It's an internal form, but I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with it, which is why I discussed it. But we changed any other forms that are completed by the public.
Another question here for SSA. What does it mean that you're recognizing the impact of chronic homelessness on supporting medical evidence? What will be the process for the chronically homeless to document their disability?
We were recognizing it. We added language in the introductory text that, as a reminder to adjudicators and to the public of some of the difficulties that people who are experiencing chronic homelessness have in terms of obtaining their medical records and obtaining some of the documentation that we typically see in disability claims. And so that was just kind of what we meant there, was that we've put something in the regulation, in the introductory text, to indicate our awareness of this, and as a reminder to our adjudicators to be aware of it as well. And we do have currently have and will continue to have sub-regulatory instructions to our field offices for special handling instructions to accommodate the unique needs of people experiencing chronic homelessness.
Thank you. Next question is whether these new updates will affect Terry cases or terminal cases.
I'm really not familiar with that term. Can you provide more information about it?
So Terry is like the field office lingo for terminal.
This should not affect that. All that this final rule is only, like, for example, new listing 1202 is replacing old listing 1202, and for all of the listings. And so any of those processes that are currently in place, they will continue to be in place.
Thanks. I've gotten through all of the questions that I see over here. Jen, or do you guys see any questions I missed?
There are just a few questions that we might contact the folks and answer offline, just because they're not specifically about the listings.
All right, so one last call to participants. If you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box while we have an equal expert of panelists online. Okay, here we go. All right, so next question came in. What weight is given to third-party reports, third-party function reports and function reports for those who do not have recent medical evidence due to lack of desire to get care?
A very good question. It involves a lot of our policies that are separate from the listings, and so I'm not a subject matter expert in our policies about opinion evidence and how we weigh opinion evidence. I know that two of the main factors we're looking for with third-party evidence are supportability and consistency with the totality of the record. But of course, if someone's mental health impairment is preventing them from getting won't necessarily be a large totality of the record for us to consider. And so it's kind of hard to give a blanket statement on, in all situations, we consider it in a certain way. It's definitely a case-by-case basis and very individualized, but certainly factors that our adjudicators consider are the amount of knowledge that the reporting person has about the claimant's functioning day to day, and the extent to which the information the third party provides is supported by and consistent with the rest of the record. We do indicate our paragraph C criteria for the listings. We do take into account that some people's feedback of a mental health disorder may be that the person does not attend treatment or does not comply with treatment recommendations. And so that is something that we do consider as part of our listings analysis.
Helpful. You said you weren't a subject matter expert on this, but it sounded like you were. So thank you. All right. A question about kind of the functional impairment level. So any change in practical guidance for how to distinguish moderate from marked in the B criteria? Or the definitions purposely vague?
Definitions are not purposefully vague. Previously, we didn't have any guidance at the regulatory level for adjudicators or the public about what those two words meant in terms of evaluating mental disorders in adults. And so we're hoping to give adjudicators and the public at least a little bit more guidance than we did previously. But no, they were not intentionally vague, and the definitions that are provided are intended to be consistent with how we understood these terms under our current rules. It's not intended to be a change in policy, it's just intended to be a little bit more information to help adjudicators kind of understand the relationship between the different points and understand when something does rise to a marked level or doesn't rise to a marked level.
Okay, great, thanks. I think we need one clarification about that are I know they will evaluate claims that are pending with the new criteria, but do they mean for claims filed on or after 117 or current claims filed prior that are assumed decided after 117?
Well, the answer is both. The new rules will apply to new applications filed on or after the effective date, and any claims that are pending on or after, which means they were applications filed before January 17, 2017, but on that date or after, they're still pending within the agency.
Thank you. A question about IQ scores. What about someone who has had 3 different IQ scores? The last one done this year with a score of 67, but one done over 5 years ago with 986. It's not even close to an 86, but he was recently denied. So about how IQ scores over a period of time get considered.
That's a good question, and it is not guidance that is provided in the final rule. However, our current policy that's under our current rules, and that will continue under forward for the time being, is going to be that when there are multiple IQ scores in evidence, that all of our mental health disorder applications are reviewed by a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and they will be, when we receive multiple IQ scores, they look at all of the evidence that we receive, and they interpreting IQ scores is very complicated and requires someone who has extensive training and experience in them, and so they will base determination on the IQ score that is the totality of the evidence that is most representative of the person's general intellectual functioning currently. And so so when you do see a variation in IQ scores like that, our psychologists and psychiatrists are trained to determine if what may have occurred in a certain, if like one score is particularly high, they know reasons why a score on a certain test day may have been particularly high or particularly low, and based on all, because we receive medical evidence, we receive third-party evidence, we receive educational records, and so they look at all of the evidence and in order to get a full and complete picture of the person's intellectual functioning, and they will use the IQ score that is most consistent with the totality of the evidence.
Hi, this is Joanna. I just wanted to also add, all of that is correct. And just so you know, if you look at all of the listings as a whole, listing 1205 has the criterion for IQ score. The other listings do not. So if by some chance that IQ score criterion is not met, there are, like I said earlier, we do not deny claims at step 3. We also have other mental disorders listings. For example, listing 12.11 for developmental disorders that does not have an IQ score criterion. So that's another possibility. And then, of course, after that, continuing through the sequential evaluation. So just wanted to point out that that is a requirement in one listing, but it's not the only way that we can allow a claim.
And just to illustrate Joanna's point, if a person with intellectual disability is, or any neurodevelopmental disorder, the environment causes marked limitations in areas of mental functioning or extreme limitation in one area of mental functioning, but the IQ score criteria is not met, another listing our adjudicators can consider is listing 1211 or 11211.
Thank you. All right, question she was going to tackle.
Scroll and find them. In relation to the on clients who have struggles with retention and medical care and aren't in care, will our MSRs hold more evidence, maybe weight with the updates? So I can start and then have Sylvia's expertise as well. I think our medical summary reports are going to be very important for these scenarios. One, because they kind of fill in some of the gaps in the medical evidence. So what was happening that was preventing someone from, to medical treatment or staying within care? And so Social Security wouldn't be able to get that information just by looking at medical records. They wouldn't be able to see maybe the person was feeling too paranoid to stay in the clinic to receive that treatment. So have a lead in that respect. And so back to the new comments on chronic homelessness that was part of this new rule, it specifies that the individuals experiencing chronic homelessness often do have these gaps. And so information from, family, from members of the community, from social workers, from outreach workers are so important in providing some of this longitudinal evidence that's not put in the records.
Thanks. So there's a question that's related to kind of timing of submitting evidence with the of the new rule. So the question is, from now on, it seems wise to submit evidence, including MSRs, identifying limitations that satisfy both current and new rules. Is what you would recommend. And I'll start, and then if Jen or SSA want to add something, please do. So I think what you'll find as when you're documenting functional impairments specifically, that the information that you need to document and that DDS is going to be looking for hasn't changed significantly. What's changed more significantly is how we organize it, and how you might organize it in the medical summary report. But we've been documenting social functioning, and we'll continue to do so. And our heading will say interact with others. So a lot of commonality there, and there will be, there's obviously changes in some of the listings, and so, I would recommend provide as much documentation and evidence as you can, that it could be decided after listings go into effect. For, SSA to weigh in as well.
I agree. I think that's a good practice.
is Jen. I'll just add to, if there's, looking through the new medical summary report interview guide, if there are some new questions that maybe you haven't asked previously, like Kristen said, looking at this information, it was like surprising. Oh, we were already gathering all of this, which was wonderful. But there might be a few new questions. They're like, oh, that's great information about how my applicant adapts to change. Go ahead and ask those and share that information and put it in there, under a new heading or just, in your functional information section. The more information we can gather, the better for this.
Another question related to ALJ decisions. Can the ALJ use the DDS medical decisions, which are made before 1/17/17, in support to deny a claim on mental health grounds? And what happens? So will the ALJ remand to DDS to apply the new criteria, or would it be mandatory for the ALJ in a medical evaluation?
That's a question that pertains to the business processes within the Office of Disability Adjudication and Review, and to some extent, some of that might be still worked out a little bit within the agency, but for the most part, at the ALJ level, ALJ considers the DD medical evaluation as a medical opinion, but the ALJ is making a de novo review. They're making a totally new review, and the ALJs are trained to apply our listing criteria. And so, for the most part, ALJs will be to consider the medical opinions that apply our current rules to our future rules the same way that they do now. And they not, for the most, we're not anticipating that if this is going to require significant remands to the DSs or significant increase in need for medical experts, because our ALJs are trained in how to do a de novo review of the medical evidence and apply our new rules.
And we saw a question come in. Will this new rule give more weight to veterans with PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder? Great question. So just wanted to point everyone to one of the new listings, 12.15, on trauma and stressor-related disorders. Reading through it, you'll see that, that's the new that contains PTSD and has all of those signs and symptoms related to post-traumatic stress disorder. The way the listings currently are, that would fit under anxiety-related disorders, but now it's one of the brand new listings, 12.15. So I encourage everybody to go there and become familiar with that. So instead of more, it's all, if they fit that new listing. But with veterans specifically, do remember that Social Security has some fast-track processing specifically for veterans, and we've got some more information of that on our website and, of course, on Social Security's website for wounded warriors.
Yeah. Right through, I think that we have answered just about questions that apply to scale. And if we haven't answered your question, it may be because it's very specific and we want to reach out to you individually, and we will be sure to do that. So anyone who has a question out there that has been answered verbally will definitely reach out to you via email. Just one call for questions. We do have a few more minutes.
As well, Kristen, at the end of the webinar, the evaluation that they'll be directed to, there will be a spot at the end of that evaluation where they can ask to be contacted.
Thanks, Susie. We have a few questions about whether or not the PowerPoint slides will be made available and where you can get them. So we can answer that now. So you can get them now if you go to your screen and go to File, Save Document. You can get a copy of the presentation. You can also get a copy of it off of the SOAR website. So if you go to the SOAR website and go to the webinars, and go to this webinar listing, and we can throw it there as well. You'll be able to download the slides and access the recording of the presentation there.
And we'll go ahead and put the link to that list that I said that has all of the new resource updates to it. We'll put that in that webinar section as well. I want to make sure we distribute that link as widely as we can so everybody can see the direct links to the new resources and tools and articles.
Thank you again to our incredible presenters. Thank you so much to the Social Security Administration and all of you who were there answering questions for us. We really appreciate your support and collaboration and helping to support the SOAR community get ready for all of these changes. And we hope all will keep in touch and take care. We'll see you on the next SOAR webinar.